Welcome home.
Thank you very much.
We haven't recorded in a while.
It's been forever. Okay, so we were just talking about what we want to talk about today, Tom, and you enticed me with the finale of the final installment of the Great Pea Experiment of 2017.
You want to start right off the bat with my pea update?
You've
been gone for practically a month, and the first thing you want to start off was how my peas did.
Yes, I drove over 7,000 miles, multiple cities, 5 national parks, crazy experience. But yeah, I do want to see how the peas turned out. That's pretty much what I was. I actually have to admit, most of the trip I was distracted by how that was going for you.
A lot of hand wringing about the peas back home.
Yeah, so like last we spoke, there was a bit of a harrowing experience, right, where the rabbits took half your crop.
They took half. Yes, that's right. And so then we tried putting another layer of fencing around the bottom of the existing fence that had smaller gaps, so the rabbits couldn't get through those gaps.
You had your deer defense and you had your rabbit defense.
Exactly. Trying to protect the half of the pea vines that have been spared as thus far. And those bugger rabbits managed to chew through that second fence and get in again.
What?
So at the final harvest, we had 2 pea vines left.
Wow.
Out of the 24 that I had originally planted.
So what type of material was this fence made out of? Was this like a straw fence? Like
it was kind of like some sort of really thick, hard plastic, but it was just no problem for them.
Huh. Okay. Oh, so this was not a wire fence.
No, it wasn't wire.
Because I was getting a little concerned you had maybe mutated zombie rabbits that were...
Yeah, with razor-sharp teeth.
Yes, exactly.
So with the final harvest, I ended up getting about a handful of peas. Out of about the 24 plants I started with, and the weeks and weeks of watering, I had about half a dozen pea pods.
Seriously?
Yes.
Oh my gosh.
So not even enough for a salad.
Wow. So you had 2. So were even the 2 vines that survived? Had they been attacked, or did they produce all of the?
They produced the entire harvest of pea pods came from 2 vines. So it was basically just 3 or 4 pods on each vine.
Huh? Because a healthy vine should give you dozens of pods.
Well, these weren't healthy vines. They had been chewed up as well.
All right. Wow. So okay. So it was quite the. Didn't realize this would be quite the battle with nature. Okay. So.
So thank you for encouraging me to attempt gardening. It was quite the trauma.
Good. I'm glad I put
an emotional roller coaster you put me on.
But you're blowing past the climactic finale though. Once you actually ate the pea pod, how was it?
It was all right.
Okay, great. So when they're writing the history books of Two Big Geeks, and we have the Peapod Experiment of 2017 chapter, "It was all right" is going to be the final assessment of that.
Yeah, they were okay. They were crunchy. Before you knew it, they were gone.
Did you eat them directly off the vine like I suggested?
I did, yeah.
You did? Like
yeah.
As they were on the vine? You positioned yourself to eat them?
No, I pulled them off the vine and then popped them in my mouth. Yes.
All right. Well, that's pretty close. It wasn't exactly what I was suggesting.
My wife had some as well. We enjoyed our meager harvest, such as it was.
Well, good for you, man. At least you did something. I like for all of my promoting of gardening, I have 3 raised beds that have absolutely nothing in them because I didn't motivate to do anything. So
yeah, well, my wife has some things growing out there too, so she'll have a few other things soon. She's got several tomato plants going right now. So
there you go.
Yeah, and some potatoes. I think she planted too.
Really? Potatoes are interesting. I've been told you can take a few old potatoes, the ones with the look all squirrely with the eyes coming out of them and stuff, and throw them in a bag of dirt, and they'll like sprout potatoes. Potatoes are like wicked hardy.
Yeah.
Sweet.
So let's get to the topic at hand. You've been gone for quite a bit.
Yes, I had my epic 3.5 week road trip with the family that I just got back from last week.
Yeah, so this is like the first time we've recorded in like a month. We had a couple of episodes come out in the meantime that we had recorded ahead of time.
Yeah.
But now we get to hear about your trip.
Yes.
If you have anything interesting to say.
Well, I leave the evaluation of interest up to the user and to you, I suppose. It was interesting to me.
Why don't you give us a overview of what you are up to in the last few weeks?
Yeah, so it was basically a national park sandwich. A a 5-layer national park sandwich with major stopping cities on the top and bottom. Right? So we had basically Grand Canyon, Zion, Yellowstone, Grand Tetons, and Badlands that I was camping out with the family. And sandwiched around that, we were stopping at major cities because most of these parks, all these parks, are out in the west, and I live in the northeast. So we drove at the start of the trip down the East Coast pretty quickly, just stopping over in Pennsylvania, Tennessee, and then we spent a few days in New Orleans with a friend there. And then we hopped over to Dallas, spent a day in Dallas with a friend, hopped over to Albuquerque, spent a day in Albuquerque with a friend. Then we did the national parks, spent 2 or 3 days at each park. And then on the way back, we hit Chicago for a couple days, gearing up for the final push. And then we drove Chicago back home to Massachusetts in 1 day straight, which was fun.
Is this the longest road trip you've ever been on?
Oh, by far, yes. We've done East Coast trips, sort of 2-week camping jaunts down to Georgia and back. But this was over 7,000 miles, 3.5 weeks. We've now covered as a family the entire U.S. except for the West Coast. So this was the big national park thing. A lot of classic touristy bucket list items that we were trying to check off that we succeeded in checking off. You know, Old Faithful at Yellowstone, Grand Canyon, obviously, glaciers and the Grand Tetons. We drove by Mount Rushmore. So we did like a third staying in hotels, a third staying with friends, and a third camping out.
Wow, that sounds like a great time.
Yeah, it was.
It's something great to do with the family as well. I mean, road trips are conscripted forced togetherness time with the family. Like you're in the car, you can't go anywhere. There is a degree of separation with technology these days. It's a lot easier just to slide into your phone, right? Yeah.
But we had a good time. I think I mentioned before that one of my kids just got their driver's license, so we split the driving up.
Very convenient. Very convenient.
Yes. So that was great. I mean, even our longest driving day on the way home from Chicago back to Massachusetts, where we left at like 7 a.m, got in at 1 the next morning.
Oh, you did that. You did that leg in one.
Did it one day.
Go?
Yeah.
Wow, Chicago to Massachusetts. Wow,
yeah.
That's a long drive.
So we pretty much had the way we set it up was we were sort of coming back from the parks, and so basically Yellowstone you can think of it as in the northwest corner of our trip, and so coming back, Badlands in South Dakota was a 1 day drive from there. That was sort of like the natural leapfrog point, and then from there, Chicago is another day. Then we sort of had the decision, do we do short little trips and just stop at random places, or do we like really enjoy Chicago and then just do a crazy day home? So we did the crazy day home.
Well, that's the one thing about doing road trips in the U.S. is it makes you realize what a huge country we have.
Oh yeah, it's unbelievable.
Vast distances.
Yeah, and the landscape variance, I think, was one of the biggest things that I was impressed upon.
Yeah, the American Southwest looks completely different from what we're used to up in the Northeast.
Yeah, as soon as we left Central Texas, as soon as we hit like Western Texas, even before approaching parks and sites and such, just the landscape to see so much less green and to see more changes in rock formations. It was crazy. Like we took hundreds and hundreds of pictures just in like West Texas on the highway, just because it was so different than what we were used to seeing. Yeah, so that was fun. So the as to the actual like art of driving and road tripping itself, just like a couple of technology notes to clean out the desk. I would never ever go on a trip again without Google Maps.
Yeah.
It's like ridiculous. So not only the dynamic routing, right? So it will give you the fastest route and it gets real-time updates for traffic and such.
Right.
So it's just ridiculously easy. But have you ever used search along route when doing a long trip with the Google Maps?
No, I haven't done that, no.
Yeah, so basically you're going from point A to point B, say it's going to take you 8 or 9 hours, whatever. And then you're like, oh, where are we going to stop for lunch? So you can search along route. Now, since we're all vegetarians, a consistently reliable lunch place is pretty much down to a subset of one, Subway. Right?
Okay.
Which it's not like the greatest meal in the world, but it's really decent compared to, what you get at like a convenience store or whatever.
Right.
So we would do search along route for Subway, and then it would pop up, it would show you the route, and it would show you like 4 or 5 different subways, and it would give you how many total minutes extra it would add to your trip, and then how far away it was. So you'd be like, oh, Subway in 27 minutes, that's a +3. Oh, but there's one in 15 minutes, and that's a +2. Oh, let's do that one, right? And so you just click on that, and then it adds it to the route. You do the same thing with like Starbucks if you're a coffee addict or whatever. And it's just like so easy. And it was just like all of a sudden, it was like magic. Like we're driving in the absolute middle of nowhere. We have no idea where we are. And then just like out of the blue, oh, look, there's a Subway, da da da, and then pick that up and then go along. And it's like, how did people manage before automated electronics? It's unbelievable.
How was the routing, the automatic routing? Like you didn't get stuck down any weird dirt roads anywhere because it routed you some direction that you didn't expect.
No, it was perfect. It was beautiful. I was pretty much drinking the Google ecosystem Kool-Aid before I left. I'm all into like the maps and photos and mail, but like Google impressed me very much with their software.
Hey, when I did my road trip of the Southwest, I did it the old-fashioned way with a road atlas.
So I actually did buy a map. I had a big map of the United States, and it came in handy once or twice. Not often, but particularly as you approach the national parks, because we have yet to install cell towers right in the middle of these beautiful places. Data connection is spotty when you approach park areas. So there were a couple of times where I used an analog map. So that was cool. I had the whole trip sharpied out on like a really big map. And I have to admit, I was looking forward to the experience of pulling out a really big map and then having trouble, folding it and then trying to figure out where we were. Like I wanted that experience. So I got a little taste of it as we were leaving Four Corners, where Arizona, Utah, Colorado, and New Mexico meet. As we were leaving that, we wanted to take a certain route, and we didn't have a data connection, so I had to pull up the map and figure out where to go, and that was cool. Slight tangent. I remember when my kids were younger, and we first got them a bike for Christmas, and my kids were really little, and I wanted the experience of trying to put a bike together on Christmas Eve and having real trouble with it.
Yep.
Like, not that I enjoyed troublesome experiences, but just like that sort of iconic in like life experience. So
it's a badge of honor.
Yeah. And so I remember putting the bike together, and it actually was going fairly smoothly. And so I was talking to my wife. I was like, yeah, I'm putting the bike together and it's kind of almost done. So she actually went out there and moved a couple of the parts around. So I got a bit of an artificially inflated iconic experience. So I had my little map experience. The other piece of tech that was cool, there's a website, I don't know if you've ever seen it, but if you ever do any road tripping, you would totally be into this, called myscenicdrives.com.
My Scenic Drives. No, let me write that down because I might need that later.
myscenicdrives.com. So basically, Google is great for efficiently getting you from point A to point B, right?
Yeah.
But if you're not completely pressed for time and you want to add, say, a half an hour to a 10-hour trip and make it orders of magnitude more scenic, this thing is really good. So you can pretty much pull up a state, and it will highlight for you what the most scenic drives are, and then you click into that drive, and it'll describe for you why it's scenic and what the stopover points are. I use that a couple of times because if you're going to do a 10-hour drive, you might as well try and make it as engaging as possible, and that really worked out a couple of times. There was, when we were leaving Four Corners, actually is when I used it. Have you been to Monument Valley?
I have not been to Monument Valley. I've been to Four Corners, but I did not go through Monument Valley, which was a mistake.
Okay, yeah. So Monument Valley for you Whovians is that opening shot from The Impossible Astronaut where Matt Smith has the cowboy hat on.
This is a place that's been in almost every single American Western film, but you're referencing Doctor Who for our fans to recognize what you're talking about.
You got to talk in the context of the language of the people you're talking to, right? It's also in Forrest Gump when he's running and then he stops running. It's like that's an iconic scene. But yeah, so it's like these ridiculously like alien-looking rock formations, but approaching that from the east, from Colorado and then southeastern corner of Utah, is an amazing drive through this place called Mexican Hat, where the landscape just evolves and evolves, and it sort of like finishes at Monument Valley. I kind of think of Monument Valley as like the finale. And so it's like you can skip to that point, but we added like 20, 30 minutes into this drive approaching it. And that was like one of the highlights of the whole trip was just this drive through southeastern Utah.
When me and my wife went through the American Southwest, we did stop at Four Corners because everyone seems to want to do that, even though it's kind of boring.
Yes.
But we immediately went south from there instead of west because we went down through the Petrified Forest National Park, which is near there to the south.
Okay. What does a petrified tree look like?
It looks like a tree, but it's made out of rock.
Really?
Yeah.
So it's not actually a tree.
It's the echo of a tree. It was a tree that had all its bits replaced by minerals.
Right. That's interesting.
Yeah. So there was, in that park, it's just like it's the middle of desert basically, but there's all these stone logs just lying around.
That's pretty cool.
So it's sort of cool, I guess. Yeah, but it's something you don't see anywhere else.
Right.
So, and it's a national park. We did a little national parks tour too. At one point, we tried to tick off as many of them as we could.
Yeah, we got 5 this time, which was pretty awesome. Yeah. So to close the book on tech, the other thing that was kind of fun was so if you're ever doing a 3 to 4 week trip, doing a 30-day trial of an unlimited streaming music service is very handy.
Right.
And economical.
Yeah.
So I did that with one of these streaming services, and it was totally fun because someone would be driving and say, "Oh, can you put some music on?" You know, in the olden days, Tom, we would have to bring our own music, right? But now you can just think of whatever song you might possibly want to hear, and I could just type that into my phone, and then the next song would go. And then while that song was going, so I had a bit of like a renaissance of my old DJ days. I was a DJ back in the day in college.
Yeah. Yeah.
And so that song would be going and be like, "Ooh, I know what song would be cool next." And so I'd search for that one, and then I'd add that to the queue, and then like I'd adjust it based on how the songs were going and what people were requesting. I totally felt like I was a DJ in the car. So
I'm sure your kids were rolling their eyes. You totally sound like an old dad at this point. Amazed at this newfangled technology that the kids all have.
Yes. Oh, I have definitely jumped the shark in terms of being hip to technology versus being like completely amazed by it. Yeah. I think we've probably had 2 or 3 conversations with our kids about how amazing like Google Photos is with sharing and just cloud storage, and they're like, and yeah, that gets the glazed over response. But in terms of songs, though, were you referring to like my kids rolling their eyes at my song selection, or just the fact that I could?
That you're excited about a streaming service, probably.
Yeah, that was probably it. Gosh, I wonder now that I'm going over these little tech tools if half our listeners are rolling their eyes. Like, really, Ped? Google Maps?
Well, we're old.
Yeah, that's true.
This is all new.
Yeah, but do you think the median age of our listeners, though, is probably younger? I bet you it is.
I have no idea.
I bet you it is, man.
I have no idea. Maybe we should have a survey.
We should. So that was cool. Yep. So there's the tech thing. So yeah, I remember that drive through Monument Valley as being like one of the first of several experiences on the trip of just like being like amazed and like in awe of the scenery. It was so different. And then so we went there and then we camped at Grand Canyon. So that was our first stop. So have you been to the Grand Canyon?
I have been to the Grand Canyon, yes.
Okay. So Grand Canyon, more than probably any other national park or maybe spot in the country, is like the classic, you have to see this. You know, you've seen a million pictures of it. You have to see it in person, blah, 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 blah.
Yeah.
I was so happy when I first saw it that all of that over-the-top, overexposed advertising had not spoiled the experience. It's still amazing, at least for me. It was still unbelievable and overwhelming to see in person.
Yeah, it's totally worth seeing. Even with all the hype it gets and stuff like that, it's still pretty grand.
Yeah, and like, but the hype didn't destroy it.
Yeah,
I think you could destroy a movie with hype, or you could destroy a song with hype, right? Just the over expectation, right? So that was amazing to me about Grand Canyon is that you could not. It could not be more hyped than it is. It's like, if you know one thing to see in the U.S., you know the Grand Canyon. Maybe Niagara Falls, right?
Right.
So that was cool. And then, so we had the opportunity, we saw we saw it from like the overlooks, like from top down sort of
Mhm.
perspective, right?
Mhm.
We also did a little bike tour along the South Rim. So that was cool
Nice,
to,
nice.
yeah, see different perspectives and all that. And then we did a little bit of hikes. So there's two like sort of main trails that go down into the canyon. So we didn't go all the way to the bottom, but we took like an hour on each trail and hiked down and up, half an hour down, half an hour up.
Yeah.
And for me, that was like orders of magnitude more impressive than looking at it just from the overlooks.
Yeah, I kind of wish we had done that when we were there. When we did our trip of the Southwest, we basically did it all in a week. So it was a real whirlwind tour. We just basically hit all the stops as quickly as we could, kind of an amazing race type of thing.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
But so we only spent one day and one night at the Grand Canyon. We didn't get to hike down inside it. So have to go back there someday and do that.
Definitely. I mean, I would highly recommend it. It was so the second of 7 things that was my highlights was this trail called the South Kaibab Trail. But it was like adding another dimension to the whole thing. It was like seeing an amazing picture of the Grand Canyon, and then you screw up your eyeballs, and then you can see it in 3D. You know those pictures,
Yeah, yeah.
right? The other thing about those trails too, and this was a common theme at all these national parks, is that the payoff to effort ratio on these hikes is so off the charts about from what you're normally used to. It's like, seriously, you could walk 5 minutes down one of these trails. And I saw really out of shape people. I saw people like kids and whatever. So it's not like, I mean, you can hike to the bottom if you want, but you certainly absolutely don't have to in order to get 5-star views. Just the smallest amount of effort gives you the most amazing views.
Yeah, that's usually always the case. If you just take a little time to just go a little bit further than where all the tourists usually congregate, it's usually worth it to get off the beaten track, so to say.
Yeah, and I think they said as visited as Grand Canyon is, they say like 6% of visitors go some degree down into the canyon. I think probably because the first thought is like, oh my gosh, I can't hike all the way to the bottom. But these trails are set up so that even if you go 10 minutes down the trail and then you just rest and come on the way back up, you get such a payoff. So I'm doing this with my kids, right? And we're all like lathered up in sunscreen and all that because it's wicked hot and all that, and we're good Northern European stock, so we burn real quick. And I'm taking pictures like every 5 seconds. So I took by the way, the whole trip I took over 1,000 pictures.
Wow. Okay.
Like way more pictures than I ever take. And I'm not like a photography buff, really. I enjoy taking pictures, but it's not like specifically a hobby. And so, now that I have this, like, I've had the smartphone now for like 6 months, right? So, I took regular pictures, I took like panoramas. I tried to take these things. Have you ever taken these like 360 immersive pictures?
I've never done a 360 one, no. These are the things that people usually post on the Facebook, right?
Yes.
I've seen them there.
But anyway, so it gives you like a 360 immersive sort of view, right? So I had this, it was the first of like many experiences where what I was seeing was so unbelievable and just had such a desire to like capture it that I would just try. And these pictures came out cool, but it's like, do you ever get this? Like when you're traveling, whatever, that you're so like moved by something that you see, and then it's like you photograph it, and then the photograph is never as good as the experience itself.
That's right.
And so there was this, I constantly experienced this duality, this I don't know, of I want to like experience the thing directly, but I also want to capture it for posterity. So then I'm like, well, why am I recording these things? Okay, I'm going to look at them later. Just to remind myself of the experience, well, that's always going to be a degree of separation from the direct experience. So why not just put the camera away and just try and absorb the thing? I don't know, I sort of always went back and forth with that, of like wanting to whip out the camera 24/7 versus wanting to just take it all in. And it's so difficult too at some of these national parks because you're driving along these scenic routes that you're never going to be on, at least for a number of years again. And just these amazing thing after amazing thing after amazing thing is passing you by, and you want to like savor it and retain it before it all sort of goes away. And you know that memory itself is ephemeral, right?
Yeah,
So even if I put the camera away and I just had direct experience of it, there would be something that was lost. And so it's like,
Well, you're not taking the pictures just for yourself, though. Really, in the long run, they're for your kids. 30 years from now, they will appreciate having those pictures.
Okay, so I'm being a sacrificial documentarian when I take pictures. Is that the
I think so, and
okay?
that's half the time. Yes.
All right, but I was also thinking a little bit, as we were preparing for this eclipse and all that, when you have these sort of like amazing in person experiences, like the that default cultural tendency, right, to whip out the phone and it's a sea of a thousand cell phones.
Yeah.
Like we saw this amazing sunset on one of the overlooks, the Grand Canyon, the last night we were there, and it was actually a pretty cool scene. That was the other sort of neat thing, slight tangent about national parks, is that it's such a cosmopolitan crowd, especially at like the most popular spaces.
Hmm.
So when we were looking at a Grand Canyon sunset, or when we were at Old Faithful in Yellowstone, like huge crowd and like languages and dress and people from obviously from like all over the world,
Yeah. Yeah.
right? It's just a really cool feeling, and there's probably not a lot of places in the country where you can rub elbows with that many people and get that experience. Like maybe in some of the more cosmopolitan areas of larger cities, New York
Right.
or
Right. Right.
San
Right.
Francisco, whatever. But it was really cool. It was sort of neat that these places would be so special as to draw people from around the world. Wow, what a cool thing that we've preserved these things. At least for
Yeah.
the at least for the moment.
The National Park Service is absolutely something to be proud of as an American.
And so cheap.
Yeah. Did you get one of those national park passes?
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
for like $80, you can go to any national park.
And it's good for like a year too. So you
Yeah.
should see if you can go up to Arcadia National Park. It's in our neck of the woods and use it there.
Yes. Yes. No, it was ridiculous. The low cost. I kept wanting to tip the rangers. It was like it's like, dude, you guys are like. Yeah, that was the other funny thing. I read a couple articles as I was doing my like over the top research for planning about overcrowding at the parks, because we went first second week of July, and so it was as busy as it was going to get.
Yeah, this is peak season for summer family travel, right?
Yeah, yeah, totally. So I mean, and we definitely saw crowds at like the busiest spots, like at Old Faithful and at the visitor center of Zion, and those kinds of things. But I never felt it certainly never approached like Disney level crowds where it's like you actually can't move. And there were so many amazing nooks and crannies to these places that 5 or 10 minute walk or drive, and like you're by yourself.
Yeah, yeah.
So plus I was like, for being in the time of history that we are in terms of taking care of the earth and preservation of nature, having too many people wanting to visit the natural parks is a good problem to have. It's like let's not complain that we have too many people wanting to go and experience pure nature directly, right? It's like
Yeah,
that's a good thing.
absolutely, it's a good thing. As long as we keep preserving these places, they'll keep coming.
Absolutely.
So where did you go after the Grand Canyon?
Okay, so Grand Canyon, and then we took a day in Page, Arizona, which is essentially the town right outside of Lake Powell.
Oh, okay. Yeah.
So it's a lake on the Colorado River created by a dam. And so the Colorado River eventually snakes down into the Grand Canyon. That's what creates the Grand Canyon, right? So we did a kayak trip on Lake Powell, like through canyons. And just, again, like from a New Englander's perspective, just an otherworldly experience of just being on this pristine lake. And then on either side of you are these just ridiculously enormous and detail varied canyons that like they get wider and shorter, and it was really hot, and so like halfway through we like stopped and swam in the lake, and it was just awesome. It was I kept thinking, that scene in Fellowship of the Ring,
Mhm.
at towards the end when they're in the boats and they're passing the two kings, that the stone carvings where they're holding their hand out,
Right. Right.
and that like dramatic swell of music as the camera pans passing these like amazing rocks.
The Argonath.
Yes,
they're
thank
called,
you.
yes.
So that's what this like 4 hour kayak trip was like for me, because I'm doing the kayak thing, but like I hadn't exerted myself to that degree in a while, right? So I'm kind of like focused, and like as I'm doing like the rhythm, that music is coming to mind, and I'm like looking up at these like amazing rock structures. So I had like a 4 hour like fellowship experience. That was pretty cool. And then we hit Zion.
Zion. Yes. Zion Canyon.
So the east entrance to Zion National Park, I would say that was third on my list of 7 highlights. That was just ridiculous. If the first drive into West Texas was our first kind of exposure to like, wow, this is a totally different landscape.
Yeah, yeah.
This was like that on steroids.
Yeah, I absolutely agree. When we did our Southwest tour, the Grand Canyon was obviously impressive, but our absolute number one highlight was Zion Canyon. It was literally the most beautiful place we had been in that entire trip.
Yeah, the amazing thing about the east entrance too is that it like slowly comes up on you. It's not like you're driving along and it's just dirty old highway and then all of a sudden a big sign comes up. It says, "Now you're in Zion." And then crazy rocks start happening.
Yeah.
It's like this slow evolution of like, okay, the landscape's pretty cool. Oh, that's kind of neat with that rock over there, with this undulating mountain and this hillside. And then it just keeps getting better and better and better. And then you end up driving through this. There's a couple of points where you drive, they tunnel through the mountain. It's like I kept thinking to myself, I literally could not imagine a richer, more varied, amazing kind of landscape. And yeah, I totally agree with you on Grand Canyon. Grand Canyon was awesome. I kind of felt like Grand Canyon was like a one-trick pony that like did that one trick really, really well.
Yeah,
So
yeah, yeah.
so totally worth seeing, but there was so much more variance in the type of landscape at Zion. From much more green
Yeah.
and just even though it's a canyon, this is the part we were at, just so much more detail to savor.
The thing that I liked about Zion, especially after having just camped at Grand Canyon, we camped up on the south rim and you look down into the canyon. But at Zion, we could camp at the bottom of the canyon and look up. And that is a much more impressive sight, I think. Being at the bottom of the canyon and seeing all the beauty down there and camping down there as well.
So we did camp at the Zion, like at that park itself. It was in Watchman Campground. So it's exactly what you're describing. You're at the bottom. So the Watchman is one of the big cliff faces, was like right around us. Yeah, and that was crazy. And they have a really fantastic system. So like from the visitor center, there's essentially a like a 10, 15 mile road that snakes through the canyon. And you get on a shuttle and then you say, "Oh, what stop do I want to stop at?" And they drop you off at the stop. And it's a couple minutes to the trailhead of like dozens of just the most amazing hikes you've ever been on.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
So Zion, we had our toughest weather to get through. So we get to Zion and it's pretty hot when we get there.
Yeah.
So it was like over 100. And so, okay, so we get there sort of in the evening and we sort of cool off on the river and group morale is still pretty good, right? We set the tent up and we go to sleep. And it was so incredibly windy that night that nobody got more than 4 hours of sleep. And we woke up and it was going to be 110
Oof.
Fahrenheit that day, which
Oof.
like 43 Celsius for our European friends.
Wow.
Right. So and everybody's completely zonked out. And there was this sort of group moment of like, all right, we could just totally pack it in and just go have breakfast at some air conditioned place and do nothing today. Right.
Yeah.
Or we could go and do one of these hikes. And it's like, we're not going to get back here anytime soon. So it's like, let's try and take advantage. So there was this awesome moment of like group rally where like, we got all our stuff together. We like slathered up in like 19 layers of sunscreen, waited in the shuttle line, and we went and we did the Narrows hike. I don't know if you know the Narrows, but basically there's this canyon hike where you're hiking basically through a river. So you're walking through the river. And that was probably the singularly most beautiful, amazing hike I've ever been on. Even just the trailhead approaching the Narrows was just so gorgeous. And we had such a great time. And it was perfect for the temperature day because you're walking through the water. And we got back after that hike, and there was like a little spot where you could just sort of sit and swim and hang out underneath the trees, and it was like being in Rivendell, man. It was unbelievable.
Yeah, that picture you sent me you looked pretty excited. I don't know if you noticed, I posted that to the Reddit.
Oh, you did?
I did, yeah.
Okay.
So warning to anyone who hasn't seen it, there are face spoilers in it.
Yes.
So, I mean, Zion Canyon, so put that on your list, people. Go to Zion Canyon. If you go to the Grand Canyon, you also have to go to Zion Canyon. And
yes,
overall, I thought southern Utah was practically the most beautiful place I've ever been in the entire United States. just in general.
Yeah, and we're skipping over at least 3 other national parks that are right in that area.
Oh yeah, Bryce Canyon is beautiful there too. We went to Bryce Canyon, and Arches National Park's near there too, which is absolutely worth seeing.
Yeah, so I would say if you are not a hiker, go to Zion because again, the effort to payoff ratio will never be higher for you. And if you are a hiker, go to Zion because it's a flippin' paradise of varied trails.
Yeah. So what we're saying is Zion.
Totally.
Go to Zion.
Yes. Not the human preservation in the Matrix, but the natural preservation in the U.S. That's Zion. We also saw that was probably the closest we got to our closest wildlife experiences.
Oh, that's right. Did you run into any bison?
So I have to send you a picture, Tom.
Okay.
Not of a bison encounter, but of a warning that I thought you would appreciate. So this is what they gave us at the entrance to Yellowstone.
It says, "Warning: many visitors have been gored by buffalo." Yeah. Did I tell you this or what?
Yes, you did. And there's a beautifully illustrated picture of a bison/buffalo giving the horny heads up to a camera taking tourist. So
kind of looks like you there.
It does. So Zion was ridiculous for how comfortable the deer and elk were. So as we're setting up the tent, I go to like brush my teeth. Just a couple of deer hanging out in the bush, like they're it's like they're cats, right? It's like that level of fear of human. And they just like walked through the campsite, and so it was like so cool. Like Grand Canyon a little bit. We had some elk going through our campsite, then a bunch of deer and elk at Zion, and then we saw bison and deer and elk and prairie dogs and bald eagle through Yellowstone. So there's another just layer of like richness to the national park experience is how not just close you are to the wildlife, but how chill they are with like human interaction because people are so respectful of not messing with them. So
yeah, the lack of hunters will do that to you.
Yes. Yeah, so no wolves, no bears, unfortunately. I wanted to see a bear, but we didn't see a bear.
Yeah.
But yeah, that was totally cool. So basically, it's about 7 hours from southern Utah to Yellowstone. So we did a stopover hotel and pizza and laundry day in Idaho. Idaho, at least the part we looked at, is a complete nondescript strip mall.
Okay.
So thank you, Idaho.
You have nothing to recommend about Idaho?
No, we actually wanted to be uber stereotypical tourists and eat potatoes in Idaho, but we did not get the opportunity. We had a nice pizza. It was sort of the second time where we sort of took a hotel break from camping.
Yeah, you need those every once in a while.
Well, it was good because, I mean, we're pretty good at camping, but we're not Grizzly Adams, right? So it's good to get a shower and reset. So we did Yellowstone. So Yellowstone was pretty crazy. First thing I wanted to do was Old Faithful just to like cross it off the list. I kind of felt like, okay, it's one of those things you have to do.
Yes, you do.
It's like you are morally conscripted if you're going to Yellowstone to do Old Faithful. So we drove right to Old Faithful, saw it go off, and we're like, okay, great, cool.
That wasn't impressive enough for you? I mean, there's only a very small number of places in the entire planet where there's active geysers like that.
I understand that, and so from a technical geological perspective, it was quite notable, and it was more than a little interesting to see it go off. We were talking about hyped things before. I think Old Faithful is a little overhyped.
Did you see any of the other geysers that are there, or was Old Faithful the only one?
We walked past some of the other geysers, but they did not go off at the time.
Oh, all right. So there you go. So there's your problem. Yeah, Old Faithful is a little hyped, I guess, because it has that huge boardwalk around it, and the only reason it's famous is that it has the most reliable, schedule for going off. It's certainly not the most impressive geyser at that park. When we did our Yellowstone trip, we did an entire afternoon of geyser spotting.
Oh, really?
Because you can go to the visitor center and they have the estimated schedules of all the major geysers that are in the geyser basin.
Yes.
And so we noted down all the times and kind of did a little hiking itinerary that took in as many of them as we could. We saw about at least a half a dozen geysers go off in a little afternoon of walking.
That's cool.
That's the way you got to do it.
Okay. Yeah, I can see if I was devoting myself just to geyser spotting, that they probably would have. See, it would have been a different pace too, because I mean, we had 3 days to do Yellowstone / Grand Teton. 'Cause Grand
Yeah.
Teton is like an hour south,
Yeah.
and so we sort of had devoted one day to hydrothermals in Yellowstone, and then
Yeah.
we were going to do another day for valleys / Grand Teton, and then we were going to do another day for the Grand Canyon of the Yellowstone.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, it's a vast park. I mean, it is. I think it's the largest national park, at least in the 48 states. There may be some bigger parks up in Alaska,
Yeah, I think Denali might give it a run.
but as far as a wilderness area that you can visit as a tourist in the lower 48 states, it's certainly the biggest national park.
Yeah, yeah. So it's funny. So with we met a couple of geyser spotters actually out there with their walkie-talkies. So there's a cool app from geysertimes.org.
Oh, yeah. You see, I did this a long time ago. I'm sure there's a better technological solution to doing a little geyser walk than writing the times down on a piece of paper.
Oh yeah. Oh, I'm looking at it right now, the app, and so we use this in order to hone in. So they're actually a little more accurate on Old Faithful than the Park Service itself is. But they have predictions for like every geyser, and then they have recording of every one that went off. I mean, we were talking a little bit about how eclipse spotters have a bit of a subculture.
Yeah.
In a geeky obsession fashion, and yes, the crazy plastic straw industry is definitely alive and well.
Yeah, there's subcultures for everything.
Yes, absolutely.
So a shout out to guys and nerds everywhere.
Yeah, absolutely. Yes, if I had the time, I would have partaken. So yes, we saw Old Faithful. More impressive though, I thought, was Grand Prismatic Spring. This was another one of my top 7 highlights. The 7 wonders of Ped's Vacation. Did you see the Prismatic Spring?
I must have. Remind me what it is.
It's this crazy huge blue, mostly blue, but on the edges, oranges and greens and yellows, steamy spring, volcanic spring that is a ridiculously short walk to get to, and it's again like alien, other planety kind of business.
I'm looking at a picture now. Yeah, we did see that too. Yeah.
I mean, for me, far more impressive than Old Faithful. I guess the thing that Old Faithful lacked for me was sound effects. I wanted it to be louder and more dramatic. I wish there were a bit of audio enhancement there. So, but no, Grand Prismatic Spring was pretty ridiculous. That's the other crazy thing that about being at Yellowstone, right? Is that you are on top of a volcano.
Yeah, you're in the caldera of a supervolcano, actually.
Right. Right. So all this stuff is like, oh, these are the simplest explanation I heard is that, well, Yellowstone is essentially a hot spot of magma.
Yeah.
Right.
There's a vast churning bubble of magma just under your feet. That's just waiting to go off.
Right. And so most places on the Earth, the magma is much further away from the crust, but at this particular spot, it's very close, and so you get
boiling water coming out of the ground. Yeah.
Right. And yeah, I mean, we don't have enough time to go over all the stuff, but like geysers are one example, hot springs are another example. We saw Mammoth Hot Springs, and just so what that does, right? When you get this continual upsurge of magma, is that when that connects with water, you get geysers, you get springs, there was this cave where like every 5 or 10 seconds would billow out this like huge plume of like looked like smoke. I think they called it like Dragon's Lair or something like that.
Yeah.
But just and you get like crazy rock formations because of this really hot water going over the sediment and etc. And so it's just variation after variation after variation of stuff that like you will not see anywhere else on the planet. And incredibly accessible. Like, here, drive to this place and then walk on this really easy boardwalk. And
yeah, sometimes too accessible. I mean, I'm sure you've seen all the stories about people wandering off the trails and falling into these hot springs.
Yes,
and never being seen again. And they basically just dissolve in these chemical baths. They never find anything after they go in again.
There you go. So stay away from your national parks, everybody.
Well, stay on the marked paths, at least.
Yeah, totally. No, it is pretty weird.
It really gives you a more so than any place that I've been, except for maybe Iceland, really gives you the sense that the planet is a living thing underneath your feet.
Yes. So apparently the last time they estimate that this volcano went off was about 800,000 years ago, and it's overdue.
Ooh.
I mean, that's what they say, right?
Yep. And if that a super volcano goes off, that is an environmental catastrophe to end all catastrophes. Yeah,
Yes.
it doesn't care that we're living on top of it. So when it
No,
goes off, good luck.
absolutely. Yep. So we had our hydrothermal day, and then we did a day of kind of like valley slash wildlife slash Grand Teton. So Grand Teton is essentially the Grand Teton Mountains of the Rockies
Hmm.
that go sort of north south, paralleling the Snake River, and it's much smaller than Yellowstone. But there's this scenic loop drive that goes up and down the river,
Yep. Yep.
and just some of the most beautiful spots I have ever been in. In fact, if you forced me at podcast point to pick like what was the most beautiful thing I saw the entire trip, it would have to be this one spot. It was called. Let me get the name of it. It was this one of these turnouts on the scenic road in Grand Tetons called Blacktail Ponds Overlook.
Hmm.
And again, like I'm there in the middle of the busiest part of the busiest time of the national park season, and there were like 3 people here. So you just turn off, and it's indescribable. I can't like put it into words. It was you see the mountains in the distance, and then sort of the next layer closer is this gorgeous lake, and then the next layer closer is this like strand of trees, and there was some bison off in this sort of valley that sort of that curved up and away, and then these yellow and purple wildflowers, and this gorgeous sun, and this little trail that like snaked through the whole thing, and it was like I was absolutely speechless. I was like I could have stayed there for like just all day. It
Yeah.
was unbelievable. So absolutely, and it's something you could just drive through. If you are approaching Yellowstone, the way that Grand Tetons is set up is that you can drive through half the park on the way to Yellowstone. Talk about low effort payoff kind of stuff. So that was pretty amazing. So we did a day there, and then we did a day at the Grand Canyon of the Yellowstone, which is where most of your classic shots, the artist point, inspiration point, that
Yep.
like
There's a massive waterfall there.
yeah. So there's a couple, again, extremely accessible, and so some overlooks at the lower falls of the canyon there, and an overlook at the upper falls. And I think the overlook at the lower falls was probably my final 7 natural wonders of Ped's road trip. Again, a place I could have just stayed like forever, and something that like is immune to overhyping.
One of my favorite spots in at Yellowstone when we visited, a little bit out of the way, but I don't know if you stopped at Boiling River. Did you hear of that place?
No.
It's like near the north gate of the park,
Okay.
like past the Mammoth Hot Springs. It's just another one of these hot springs where the boiling water is coming out of the earth, but the spring flows down a little slope and into a mountain river. So it's like you have one hot river and one cold river joining up together, and the area where the junction is like a perfect little hot tub because the two temperatures of the water mix.
And did they let you go in?
Yeah, they do. You can wait out there, or if you have your swimming trunks, you can just lie back and just have a little free spa.
That's pretty nice.
But it's just so weird to see just a boiling hot river of water just coming out of the ground and just flowing away. Like
Right.
where does all this water come from? But
Right.
it's just a neat little place. It's a little bit off the beaten track as far as Yellowstone, but it's worth visiting. It's right actually near the 45th parallel of latitude.
Huh. So like more broadly speaking, like when you see these just like crazy, ridiculous, like otherworldly, can't put it into a framework kind of thing. Like what's like your base feeling? Is it just a pleasurable experience to have because of the novelty, or do you come away with it changed in some way, or yeah, like because I did sort of roll around in my hashtag overthinking it mind because we had been talking about purposeless pursuits and things like that recently about like what is the impact, like why am I actually going to these national parks, right? Like other than like I enjoy spending time with my family, what is it about these amazing examples, expressions of nature that are like what is the value in it in and of themselves? Like if someone was about to drill the whole thing down, resource it off for energy scrap, what pitch would you make in order to preserve it? I have a hard time putting it into clear words.
Yeah, but even if you have a hard time putting it into words, you know there's something there, right?
Mm.
There's something of value there, even though if you can't describe it, even if it's only makes an incremental benefit to your life experience, it's still worth visiting these places. In the long run, you'll be happy that you have spent that time.
Yeah.
Even if you can't describe why it is important,
Yep.
the fact that we have preserved these places
Yep.
is a brilliant piece of forethought for future generations.
Totally. And just in the nick of time, too. If you look at historically when the national
Right.
parks were set up, like
Right.
a few decades later, and the wheels of industry would have steamrolled over them pretty quick.
Yeah.
Yeah. So part of me sort of like took this idea and I was just sort of just contemplating it in the sunset. But my other part was researching it on Wikipedia. So I was looking at the concept of awe. And
Okay.
and like, what is the feeling / emotion of awe?
Hashtag overthinking it.
Oh yeah. I mean, I did this mostly after vacation, and so like Wikipedia kind of describes awe as this combination of wonder mixed with fear,
Fear. Okay.
as opposed to just it's like the first time you see anything close to like the Grand Canyon, and you have this like mouth open kind of like right. It's sort of you're trying to take it all in. So there's different theories about what is happening with the human system. The one I kind of liked is takes it from an information processing perspective and says the experience that you're having is a sort of a data point, a piece of observational evidence that is so not explainable in your modes of thinking that you come into the experience with that it requires either a expansion or total restructuring of your modes of thinking. So it's kind of like, oh, I'm walking up to the Grand Canyon and I sort of think of, well, this is the range of what nature can express. And then I kind of step up to the overlook and then boom, it blows up my limitations of what I previously had thought. So now I have, in this information processing theory, you can go one of three ways. You can either adjust your current structures, right? And so you sort of take what you currently have, but you just sort of like reorient and reconfigure, or you sort of completely rewrite them. You sort of throw out the book and write a new structure, or or you have PTSD because you resist changing yourself and changing your conceptions. So there's this high tension dissonance that is created by this piece of evidence that's coming in that really needs to be assimilated, and yet you don't want to change, and so it creates trauma.
Yeah, I like that.
And that to me is kind of common sensible. It's like when you think of like what are you physically doing when you encounter these places? It's like the mouth open, eyes widened, jaw dropping. Wow, OMG, you want to sit and kind of absorb it. These are all sort of like symptoms of I need to take in more input, right? It's like you're trying to expand as much as possible your sensors and sit there and just integrate this experience.
Yeah, when I look back and think about things that have brought the most awe into my life experience, it's usually always some encounter with the natural world because of the forces involved in these places. Like, I mean, at Yellowstone, you have just that huge churning mass of magma just generating the most amazing physical features, and the Grand Canyon is just the power of millions of years of erosion can have on the landscape. And even stuff like the total solar eclipses creates that sense of awe because of the distances and the forces involved.
Yeah, I sort of like came to the eventual sort of like feeling that like if you could completely take in everything that the natural world has to offer, that the entire universe has to offer at one time, you would just be overwhelmed in a complete state of wonder and awe. And also not able to tie your shoes. which is the problem. Well, not the problem, but it's the nature of human experience. It's like it's in order to like go to work and do your job and podcast and wash the dishes and all that, you have to like finitize your perspective. Like you have to shut it off. You can't be like eyes wide open, mouth agog, 24/7 in joyous wonder if you have to focus on taking care of business.
Mm.
right? And this goes all the way back to like, human evolution, or like in terms of like, just surviving and, hunting and gathering and taking care of the tribe and all that. So it's like by our functional nature, by our functional need to survive, we necessarily have to have a finite perspective. And then if you continue to hone that in more specifically to like to my life and my job and my personal responsibilities, you can get a very detailed but a very finite perspective. So then when I take a few weeks to sort of set that functional perspective aside and allow my point of view, my perspective, my consciousness to expand as much as possible, then it expands it. It infinitizes that perspective. You get closer and closer and closer to that. Like if you had nothing to do, no responsibilities in life, you'd be much more free and flexible in order to absorb that more frequently, I think.
Mm.
So that's kind of how I settled on it eventually. But it is pretty funny how nature itself is what triggers that experience. So yeah, so that was Yellowstone. So we were pretty tired after Yellowstone.
This is Yellowstone is probably what, like 2 weeks into your road trip at this point?
Yeah, like a little over 2. Yep. So yeah, so that was the other kind of thing. So I just talked about trying to expand and absorb. I think after Yellowstone, I started to feel like full.
Overstimulated?
To be very particular with my word selection, I would say over inspired, maybe.
Overawed.
Yeah, I think it's almost like my capacity like sort of filled up, and then it was still cool, but it was almost like a full cup where the water is it's still nice and beautiful water, but it is sort of overflowing. I kind of got this a little bit towards the end of the Yellowstone jaunt. We were just going to amazing, unbelievable overlook after overlook in the Grand Canyon of the Yellowstone. So after that, we went to Badlands, which is essentially relatively in the middle between Yellowstone and Chicago.
Mm-hmm.
So this is our leapfrog point back home.
This is South Dakota.
Yeah, South Dakota. Yeah, so we did do this cool drive past Mount Rushmore, which was more of a checkbox experience for me. Like, okay, Mount Rushmore, check.
I have not been there, but I imagine it's a lot smaller than you expected it to be.
It was smaller than you expected.
Yeah.
Yeah. Maybe it was just the fact that I was full up with the rest of these previous experiences, but I was like, okay, there it is. Next.
Right.
If I hadn't been on any trip and I was just out for a drive and I had seen Mount Rushmore, that would probably have been maybe a little different relatively. Yeah, but Badlands was amazing. So at Badlands, actually, we had the best astronomical experience.
Ooh, do tell me.
Yeah, so for one reason or another, we didn't have super fabulous stargazing opportunity. So one thing was timing. So it was close to a full moon most of the trip.
Oh, yeah.
So, and we had a little bit of weather. So, but the last night of camping we had on the whole trip in Badlands, we had the clearest sky and perfect weather and no mosquitoes. So we took our pillows from the tent and we just laid them down outside, which, by the way, if you're a stargazer neophyte, don't make the mistake of standing and trying to look at the stars because your neck will kill you after 5 minutes. So just throw a pillow down on the ground, lie down, and then give your eyes 20 or so minutes to adjust to the light.
Yeah. And then you stare off into the infinite.
Totally. And the other cool thing about Badlands is that the sun set wasn't until like 8:30 or so at night, and then it didn't get completely dark until 9:30 or 10. So it was this gradual exposure of the stars. And it's not like the stars come out bang, 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 right? It's like this sort of subtle reveal. And so first you see Venus, right? The morning star, the evening star, even though it's not a star, because it's so bright and it's so recognizable. And then, Polaris comes out as very recognizable North Star. And then we could make out the highlights of the first constellation and in the Big Dipper, very identifiable on the horizon. And then it was great. It was just like star after star after star. And it was a very chill, relaxed experience. You could see the Milky Way in the background, right?
Nice. Yep.
And saw a faint light that was going very straight and then kind of disappeared. So
Satellite. Yeah. Most people don't realize you can see satellites at night if you have a dark enough sky.
Yeah. So that was cool. So that was like a really my kids were like, well, what was that? And I was like, oh yeah, well that's a satellite. Like what? Right. And if you know what you're doing too, right, you can train your telescope on the International Space Station.
Yep.
So for like 30, 40 minutes of like lying down on the ground investment, got like a chock full of free astronomical observances.
Mm-hmm. And more stars than you can count.
Totally. And and Badlands is just amazing. And again, another one of these, alien landscapes. Very quiet too.
Yeah.
And definitely the coolest thing between Wyoming and Chicago.
The vast plain and hours and hours and hours of driving.
Yes. We did stop at Waldrug in South Dakota.
Of course. An obligatory stop on Route 90.
Yes, absolutely. There's definitely a not tiny part of me that likes being a complete tourist in that regard.
Yep.
Like, please trap me. I enjoy the being trapped experience. Their veggie burger was actually pretty good. Oh, that's the other kind of small detail. So we were at Yellowstone. We're like, oh, what are we going to do for like food and all that? And we camped out and cooked up some stuff, but we're all vegetarians, right? So we're like, oh, what else are they going to have? Dude, like 5 minutes from the campground, I had grilled tofu over brown rice with sautéed spinach. like the level of service at the national parks these days is pretty great.
So there's enough weirdos like you in the world that they can cater you.
Totally. Percentage of vegetarians outside the U.S. is higher than inside.
Yeah, and they have a lot of international tourists there.
Yeah.
So anything besides that of note between here and Chicago?
Well, so we did do Six Flags.
Six Flags. Where's that?
Roller coaster amusement park, hour north of Chicago.
Okay.
We did that because it's just another thing to do.
Something for the kids.
Something for the kids. Well, I mean, the kids enjoyed the whole trip, but it was my wife and my kids have season passes because they love that kind of thing, and and I like the antique cars that go 3 miles an hour that stay on that track. That's about as fast as I like to get it, though.
That sounds like right up my alley.
Yeah, totally. No, so that was fun. Although it was an interesting juxtaposition of you were talking earlier, stimulation versus inspiration.
Mm.
All right, and Six Flags is to go from pristine nature national park to Six Flags, which is like the most over-the-top, unapologetic, we are going to stimulate your senses like kind of place, park. Right? It was that was interesting, but it was fun. And then we did Chicago. Chicago was a blast. We had the neat thing about Chicago, as well as New Orleans and Albuquerque and Dallas, is that we had friends in each of the cities that we met, and then would take us around for like half a day or so.
Yeah, that's convenient.
And it's to be in a place. I mean, so on the one hand, I love TripAdvisor and just reading every single possible review under the sun about what to do in a place. On the other hand, it's really cool to be in a place where someone lives there and loves the place. Like it just so happened that the person who took us around New Orleans loves New Orleans, and so we just got sort of fed off of her enthusiasm and energy, right? And same thing for Chicago and Albuquerque and Dallas. So yeah, so it was a lot of fun. Yep. And then we did the straight drive home from Chicago to Massachusetts, as it were.
Yep.
And we were back, and here we are.
The kids have a good time?
Yeah, I think so.
Some memories they'll last for their lifetime?
My son, who just got his license, enjoyed the 80-mile-an-hour speed limit.
Ugh.
Yeah, I saw your comment on that photo, Tommy. You weren't supportive of that.
No, that's too fast.
Some of those roads, though,
there's
man.
no reason you ever want to drive that fast.
Dude, some of those roads are just, you could see to the horizon. That's how wide and straight it is. But no, it was cool. I thought we did a pretty good job of balancing, allowing the kids to use their phones and stuff, and kicking them off it, and doing some hikes when we wanted to. So
that sounds like a good trip. Now you're making me want to go on a big U.S. road trip again. I haven't done that in a long time. We'll do a little road trip for the eclipse, but I do want to go back to the Southwest and Yellowstone again. Those are just amazing places. And you have to go to the West Coast too. You have to go to California and the Pacific Northwest, right?
Yes.
So you should put Yosemite on your list. That is a fantastic national park.
Yeah. So Yosemite is definitely on the list. So yes, I have to admit that 2 days after I returned, I was caught on TripAdvisor looking at California national parks.
Yeah.
Yosemite, absolutely. Sequoia is out there.
Yeah, I've been there.
Redwoods, some amazing drives up and down the coast, and is on the docket.
Good.
So shall we close out with some Doctor Who news?
Doctor Who news, sure.
So we have big news for Doctor Who.
We have a new doctor coming in.
We do.
Mm-hmm.
And slightly controversial because still not ginger.
I see what you did there.
There you go. Yes, of course. We're talking about Jodie Whittaker, the first female doctor.
Yeah, good. I mean, I don't think it was much of a surprise for people who have been following this series closely in the last few years. They certainly did a lot of effort to make it a narrative possibility that the Time Lords can change gender, and it's about time.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, so I guess that's the first point is that canon-wise, it's been very well established that they can change gender. And in fact, so I only saw the last few episodes of the most recent season, Capaldi's last episodes before the Christmas special. In the Doctor Falls, in the last episode of the season,
yeah,
he has some exchange with Pearl where he's talking about when he first met the Master.
Mm-hmm.
And he says something along the lines of, "Oh, back when he was a man," and I think I was too. And then Pearl's like, "Well, what are you talking about?"
Mm-hmm.
He's like, "Oh, yeah, we're not restricted to your Earth human modes of gender, etc." So yeah, there's a whole lot of setup, and I found it interesting that the reaction to the fact that she was female, I found significantly different within the Doctor Who fan community than from society at large.
How so?
I don't know if you read the Doctor Who Reddit at all.
I dabble in there occasionally.
Yeah. So most of that fan reaction was, "Okay, cool. She has like a good history. I just hope she's a good doctor."
Right.
And where most of the focus on outside was like, "Oh my gosh, they've broken new ground with a new female doctor." And of course, the internet being what it is, there's nasty places, and so a few mean spirited comments. But I'm looking forward to it. So she was in Broadchurch before.
Yeah, she was. I've never seen Broadchurch. Where I've seen her is in the film called Attack the Block, where she also pairs up with a very young John Boyega as the two principal protagonists of that film.
Ah.
Mm-hmm. So you can get to see the Doctor and Finn from Star Wars in the same movie together.
And David Tennant was also in Broadchurch.
That's right. Chris Chibnall, the new showrunner for Doctor Who, was the creator of Broadchurch as well. So he has plenty of experience with Jodie Whittaker.
So that was the other thing that I thought was actually notable in a good way, is that obviously with a new showrunner coming in, a new doctor, that's a lot of change. So to have a pre-established working relationship between the two is only good for how quickly they can establish chemistry, right?
Yeah.
So
I hope it works out.
Yeah.
Every new doctor is always a thrill to see how the actor takes the character. I mean, that's what's so great about this. The character itself is that you can accept a new actor so easily in that role because it's part of the story itself. The 50-year plus story of Doctor Who is that they can make these kinds of changes so easily.
do you tend to accept doctor changes easily? I mean, I've seen some funny little workflow diagrams in the past days after the announcement of like the grieving and acceptance and falling in love process that we go through with each new regeneration. Like, and there's a little bit of that for me where like, oh my gosh, I thought Matt Smith is probably still my favorite doctor.
Yeah. So
it took me a little while to warm up to Capaldi. And I think that was actually complicated this time by, I found his accent hard to understand.
Yeah.
And I was not in love with the tone of writing in his first season. So it took me a little longer, but I really like him now.
Yeah, I think it always takes a little while for the writers to catch up to how the actor is portraying the character because they don't know how the actor is going to play the Doctor right off the bat. So they just have to basically write these scripts as, the Doctor in general character.
Right.
Now when they get a better sense of how the actor brings the personality alive, they can start to shape scripts to enhance that. And I think for most Doctors, their later stories are usually their best.
Yeah, that's true. I think my favorite Capaldi, though, is still Heaven Sent, Hellbent, where he gets trapped in that Time Lord trap, and he's banging on the diamond wall there.
Yeah.
Did you like the last? Now that this season of Doctor Who is over, did you like the season?
I enjoyed it. Yeah, it was pretty good. It was. I think it was the best of the Capaldi seasons. I love what we're going to get in the Christmas special. I love seeing the first Doctor come back.
Yes, I was just about to ask you about that. That was pretty neat.
I mean, I'm a classic Whovian. I really dig the old series more so than the new stuff. So
yeah,
anything that connects back to the old series is A-okay in my book. I love that stuff.
So the two-parter finale of this season was a total throwback to how the Cybermen were first introduced, right?
Oh, the Mendazian Cybermen. I loved that.
You're into that?
Yeah, and they brilliantly made that really goofy design of the old Cybermen actually have a reason for it. And they were especially creepy. So
Yeah.
they were really successful at making them creepy again. But the latest versions of the Cybermen aren't so much creepy as they're just kind of, I don't know, they're kind of a little too robotic.
No, I think you're totally right. That was cool the way they did it. So when they had the first Doctor at the very end, was that an actor who looked like him, or is that a Princess Leia-like computer regeneration of him?
That's an actor who looked like him. That's David Bradley. He had previously played the William Hartnell in the, what is that special called? The Adventure in Time and Space? I forget. He had played William Hartnell in a biopic about Doctor Who a couple of years ago during the 50th anniversary.
Okay.
And so he knows the character. So he's playing the first Doctor. It's not a digital recreation.
Right. Excellent. So that the Christmas special / transition / regeneration episode will be all awash in classic Whovian stuff then.
Yes.
Given that he's going to be in it.
I hope so. Yes.
Yeah. It kind of makes sense too. I mean, I think BBC is very conscious of the fact that there's going to be a certain level of fandom that is going to have a higher need for level of acceptance of a female Doctor. They're probably taking great pains to kind of go back to the origins, right? And be like, okay, this is how we change. Let's talk about it.
I don't have a lot of sympathy for people that are butthurt about this.
Wait. People that are what?
Butthurt.
Butthurt. Okay.
I think that's really one of the best things that have come out of this new series is that the Doctor Who fandom has become a lot more diverse.
Yeah.
And I think that's a huge, huge benefit. And that's a good thing.
Yeah. No, I would agree with you. I mean, I was mentioning the Doctor Who Reddit earlier, but every Who person who considers themselves a Who fan I've talked to has had no problem with it. It's people who want to hate on anything will hate on everything. So, I've always been very proud about how progressive socially Doctor Who has been. I think it's been, even when you compare it to other socially progressive sci-fi universes like Star Trek, I think it's even been a little further on than, at least recently, than those have been. So
that's absolutely right. Yep.
It's always been a good feather in their cap. Sweet. All right. Onwards and upwards with Doctor Who then.
Mm-hmm. Looking forward to it.
Rock and roll, Jazz Pilgrim.
Hey everyone. Thanks for listening. If you're enjoying the podcast, please help us get the word out by sharing us on social media, or leave us a review on Apple Podcasts or wherever you download your podcasts. It all helps new listeners to find us. We thank you for your support.
I'm impressed with your editing skills that you got 2 episodes out of our previous record sessions.
Was the latest one I sent you okay?
Yeah, I think so.
Okay. I wasn't as sure about that one as I was the previous one.
Yeah. No, it was good. I liked it.
Okay.
I mean, any episode that has you meowing, we have to keep. So.
Yeah, I know. I wasn't happy about that, but I got to let go at a certain point, don't I?
You got to give the people what they want.
Well, they don't. I don't know if they want that, but it's what you want.
Well, that is what this is all about.
Yeah. Well, it's half of what it's all about.
Yes, that's true. Well, wait. If there's like a choice of like 51-49, can I get the 51?
No.
Can I have the vice presidential tie-breaking vote on creative matters?
No. I break all ties because I edit.
This is true. No, that's true. I've definitely had the experience of like only realizing weeks later that like something didn't make it in. I'm like, why didn't that make it in?